Prime Minister, Madam Carney, Ministers, Governor, former Prime Minister, Lowy Institute board members, High Commissioners, other members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Lowy Institute. Bienvenue. And congratulations to those of you in the room for getting a ticket this evening. This is the hottest event, I was just telling the PM, this is the hottest event in Sydney since the Bad Bunny concert on the weekend. All sorts of long-lost friends have been texting me to see if they could get on the list. So nice to see some of you this evening. I'm Michael Fullilove. I'm the Executive Director of the Lowy Institute. Let me acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which the Institute stands, the Gadigal of the Eora Nation. I'm delighted this evening to welcome to 31 Bligh Street a rock star leader, someone I've admired for a long time for his back catalogue as well as his latest hits, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Mark Carney. I've watched Mr Carney's entry into politics and the Prime Ministership very closely for two reasons. The first is I'm married to a Canadian-Australian, my wife Gillian, who's here with us this evening, and I have three Canadian-Australian sons, so I know Canada well. I've swum in Canadian lakes, I've shivered in Canadian winters, I like Timbits or an apple fritter with my Tim Hortons. I know all about the Terry Fox Run and the Tragically Hip. In other words, PM, I'm a charter member of the Canada lobby here in Australia. But I've also been intrigued by Mr Carney's career because it's so unusual. In parliamentary systems, it's so rare for MPs to have risen to the top of their professions before they entered politics. Mr Carney entered Parliament having already been a highly successful investment banker as well as the governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. That's unheard of. And so far, he has made professional politics look pretty easy. He won the leadership of the Liberal Party and became Prime Minister even before he was elected to Parliament, which wouldn't fly in Australia. He quickly transformed the Liberal Party's fortunes and he won an impressive general election victory last April. Now, central bankers usually have a pretty sober disposition. Politicians have to be lively. Sometimes they have to flick the switch to vaudeville, as my old boss Paul Keating said. Mark Carney, it seems, can do both sobriety and vaudeville. He's equally at ease in the House of Commons, on the rope lines, or on the red carpet. He's also already made his mark in international politics in the form of a call to arms at the World Economic Forum in Davos in January. We are in the midst of a rupture, he said, not a transition. I'm someone who believes that speeches matter, even though we don't hear that many great speeches these days. The PM reminded us that the single note of a fine speech, well delivered, can still penetrate the hubbub, including all the noise emanating from the White House. So hosting Mr Carney has been a long-held ambition of ours, but in the aftermath of his Davos speech, we're even more chuffed to welcome him to Bligh Street this evening. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Prime Minister of Canada. Welcome.
That's fantastic. Very kind. It's exceptionally generous. Sorry, Michael, like, what can I do after that introduction? It's incredible. Great. I'm honored to be here at the Lowy Institute. I'm honored to be here in the presence of Malcolm Turnbull. I learned how to move from being an investment banker to a successful politician, amongst other, from Malcolm. How to translate caring about the environment and doing something about the environment from Malcolm, and how to keep going from Malcolm. I learned how to manage risk from Glenn Stevens. Also, a man, have you ever done vaudeville, Glenn? Not yet, there's time, there's still time. There's still time, we'll do that. But no, and Stephen, thank you. Thank you for your chairmanship. Thank you for having me here, fellow ministers, for being here, friends. Ross, McHugh, and others. It's a great pleasure to be here. This institute, for over 2 decades, has hosted some of the most important conversations about our world's future. That's why I'm honored to be here. That's why I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute in some small way at this crucial time. And I'll just say at the outset, I'm just going to say a few words in French, and then I will, the balance will be in English, but I want to do un petit résumé en français. Alors ce soir, je parlerai de la rupture de l'ordre mondial, de l'impact de cette rupture pour des pays comme le Canada et l'Australie, de l'urgence de renforcer notre souveraineté et de l'opportunité de le faire en partenariat avec des alliés. Nous le savons, le monde a changé et nous devons aussi changer. Nous acceptons le monde tel qu'il est, sans attendre passivement qu'il devienne tel que nous le souhaitons. Et si les puissances moyennes travaillent ensemble, nous pouvons faire plus que protéger notre souveraineté. Nous pouvons construire quelque chose de mieux, de plus prospère, de plus juste que ce qui existait auparavant. So, you mentioned the rupture world. Yes, the world order, in our view, is undergoing a rupture. And the old norms of the rules-based international order are being erased, and that new system that will emerge ultimately is yet to be built. Global institutions have often been too slow to react to crises and too ineffective when they did. And this breakdown has been building over time. Over the past few decades, a series of crises, beginning in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics, have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, and supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. So countries, and this was the point I was trying to make, in Davos, countries cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes their source of subordination. Geostrategically, hegemons are increasingly acting without constraint or respect for international norms or laws, while others bear the consequences. Now, the extremes of this disruption are occurring in real time in the Middle East. To be clear, Canada, like Australia, has long seen Iran as the principal source of instability and terror in that region. The regime and its proxies have murdered hundreds of Canadian civilians over the years and caused untold suffering for millions of people in the Middle East and beyond. And despite more than 2 decades of negotiations and diplomatic efforts, Iran has not dismantled its nuclear program nor halted its enrichment activities. Canada has long supported the imperative of neutralizing this grave global threat. We stand with the Iranian people in their long and courageous struggle against the regime's oppressive rule, which is why we support efforts to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace and security. We are actively taking on the world as it is, not passively waiting for a world we wish to be. But we also take this position with some regret, because the current conflict is another example of the failure of the international order. Despite decades of UN Security Council resolutions, the work of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and a succession of sanctions and diplomatic frameworks, Iran's nuclear threat remains. And now, the United States and Israel have acted without engaging the UN or consulting with allies, including Canada. So the question is, where to from here, given we have a rapidly spreading conflict and growing threats to civilian life across the region? Canada reaffirms that international law binds all belligerents. We condemn the strikes carried out by Iran on civilians and civilian infrastructure across the Middle East. We implore all parties, including the US and Israel, to respect the rules of international engagement. We call for a rapid de-escalation of hostilities, and we're prepared to assist in achieving that goal. Because resolution of this crisis will ultimately require a commitment to a broader political solution, an engagement to avoid a wider and deeper conflict. Civilians must be protected, and all parties must commit to finding enduring agreements to end both nuclear proliferation and terrorist extremism. And we'll continue to pursue this approach with like-minded countries and participants across the continent. I'd now like to turn from that to what I originally intended to address more fulsomely, and don't worry, I'll try and keep to time, to the broader challenge that exists to sovereignty and prosperity. And I'd suggest that I'll start with the overall context. Middle powers like Canada, and I would suggest Australia, should recognize that the rupture in the international system represents just that, what that word means, a clear break from the past. And we need to act decisively to secure our shared future. The good news is we have the capacity to build important elements of that new order, an order that encompasses our values, including respect for human rights, sustainable development, solidarity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. And to make this practical, let me highlight 3 principles that would help achieve this goal. The first is to be clear that the requirements for sovereignty have evolved, and that means that we do need to as well. Right now, many countries are concluding that they must develop greater strategic autonomy. It's an understandable impulse, because when the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself. A country that can't feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options. But in the 21st century, the economic security and prosperity of countries extends far beyond food, conventional energy, and defense, as important and fundamental as these are. Today, sovereignty requires reliable access to space-based communications and semiconductors. It requires unhindered access to AI, digital sovereignty, critical minerals, payment systems, clean energy technologies, and vaccines. And because governments and businesses have long prioritized efficiency over resilience, we've all developed supply chains and trading relationships that create dependence on hegemons, in some cases hyperscalers, for essential determinants of our sovereignty. So our strategic imperative, Canada's strategic imperative, is to build sovereign capabilities and resilience in these critical sectors, at home, first and foremost, but with trusted partners like Australia, to ensure that integration is never again the source of our subordination. The second point I want to make is expanding on that last, which is to build true sovereignty. It can't be achieved in isolation. It requires diversification and partnership. Canada is focused on building a dense web of connections, ad hoc coalitions that work issue by issue with partners that share enough common ground on those issues to act together. In contrast, great powers can afford to go it alone. They have the market size, the military capacity, the leverage to dictate terms. Middle powers like Canada do not. But when we only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, we negotiate from weakness. We accept what's offered. We compete with each other to be the most accommodating. And this isn't sovereignty, it's the performance of sovereignty. In a world of great power rivalry, countries like ours have a choice: compete with each other for favor or combine to create a third path with impact. This creates enormous opportunities for Canada and Australia to work together, at a minimum to limit risk, but really more fundamentally and positively to build and increase prosperity and build our collective sovereignty. So for example, as this room knows, Canada, like Australia, has one of the largest critical mineral reserves in the world. We're both abundant in the minerals that are most in demand and most necessary for military and economic strength. We are building, and part of the point of this visit, not this part of the visit, but the broader visit, is to build out our critical minerals alliance with Australia, creating the largest mineral reserve held by trusted democratic nations. And let's give a few figures. Together, we produce more than a third of global lithium, a third of uranium, more than 40% of iron ore. We have a combined, between these two nations, right now, $25 billion war chest to fast-track projects. Globally, we're number 1 and number 2 as the most attractive mining jurisdictions in the world. I'll give another example under the control of the Minister of National Defense, Canada's Minister of National Defense. We've just launched our first ever defense industrial strategy. We will invest $500 billion into our defense, our broader defense ecosystem over the course of the next decade. Right now, I'm going to go off script. Right now, oh no, I will. It's too late now, I have to do it. Right now, when we spend on defense, capital on defense, 70 cents of those dollars goes to the United States. You can imagine that that doesn't make sense from a risk management perspective, and it doesn't make sense when you're substantially increasing your expenditure. So a key pillar of our strategy is to build at home, and to partner with like-minded allies such as Australia. We already have one great example, which is the Arctic over-the-horizon radar that we're jointly developing based on Australia's world-leading cutting-edge technology. But many more examples can follow. And given the changing nature of warfare, that means from AI to aerospace. The point is, the nations that invest in their own capabilities across strategic sectors and partner with like-minded allies will multiply their strength to form coalitions. And they become a more effective bloc to deter aggression, protect supply chains, and realize core economic interests. So that's why we're rapidly diversifying our partnerships. That's why we've signed 20 new economic and security agreements across 4 continents in the last 11 months. It's why we were the first non-EU country to join the Safe Defense Procurement Program in Europe. And it's why we're working with Australia to build a bridge between the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Mr. Malcolm, Croatian, build a bridge between the TPP and the European Union. We're successful, we'll create a new trading bloc of 1.5 billion people. Now, Australia understands well the value of coalitions. Your regional partnerships, including AUKUS and the Quad, our critical minerals alliance through the G7, which Australia is a part of, multiply Australia's power and overall effectiveness. My final point is that middle powers working together can not only build true sovereignty, we can also help, underscore help, shape the next global order. Australia and Canada can't compel like the great powers, but we can convene. We can set the agenda, shape the rules, and organize and build capacity through coalitions that deliver results at speed and global scale. Because we have 2 advantages. It's clearer every day. We have 2 advantages that the hegemons lack. The first is legitimacy, and the second is trust. Australia and Canada have built this up over a century. We respect our commitments. When we sign deals, we honor them. When we join multilateral efforts, we multiply their impact. Other countries know we mean what we say and value our partnership. Contrast, the hegemons can compel, but that comes with costs, both reputational and financial. Change through compulsion doesn't last. By contrast, using trust to convene like-minded nations working together creates lasting change and stronger new institutions and systems. Middle powers have more power than many realize. Europe, Australia, Canada, Japan, South Korea. This coalition has a GDP larger than the United States, 3 times the trade flows of China, the largest research and development spend in the world, 62 of the world's top 100 universities, and the largest source of cultural exports globally. If we work together in a variable geometry, in other words, different coalitions for different issues, we can do more than protect our sovereignty. We can build something better, more prosperous, more just than what came before. And our view is that this is multilateral's evolution. It's renewing the international order through new institutions with new capacities, setting the agenda, convening, building a better world. Not all at once, but one issue, one strategic sector, one coalition at a time. Thank you very much. I look forward to this. There you go.
PM, thank you for those very thoughtful remarks. Thanks for agreeing to take my questions. I want to come to, I'd like to have a really broad-ranging conversation, talk about America, China, Europe, middle powers, but I do want to start with the Middle East as you did. As you said, the conflict has spread in the last few days to the Gulf states, to Lebanon, Iraq, Cyprus, and elsewhere. Western countries have reacted in a number of different ways. So the Spanish Prime Minister criticised the strikes as a breach of international law. The Starmer government equivocated a little bit, and President Trump accused Mr. Starmer of not being Winston Churchill overnight. Both you and Prime Minister Albanese have expressed your support for the initial strikes, but it seems to me you've recalibrated slightly today, and you said we take this position with regret because the current conflict is another example of the failure of the international order. So do I understand the Canadian position is you would have preferred if negotiations and diplomatic processes had worked, but on balance, the necessity to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons outweighs any violence that's been done to the international order?
I'd put it this way, which is that the objective of preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear bomb capacity, nuclear weaponry, we support that. We've supported it for decades. And the series of efforts, including military, have not yet yielded the result that is necessary for peace and stability in the Middle East. The initial justification for action, at least in our conversations, was related to that. We support that. We obviously support at the same time, maybe I should state it, preventing or ending, I should say, the export of terror through proxies and directly that Iran has been doing for decades. To be absolutely clear, before we get to international law and other aspects, Iran is a serial offender, breaker of international law, and that has existed for decades at great cost. Now, the action that was taken, we weren't consulted on it. There was not a process, a broader process for it. It would appear prima facie not to be consistent or to be inconsistent with international law. It's a judgment for others to make. I'm not a lawyer, let alone an international legal expert. We take the situation as it is, including when we made that statement. We take the situation as is with the U.S. aims. As the situation is now, with the expansion, I have to say, a predictable expansion of the conflict. There is first and foremost an importance to re-emphasize the rules of international engagement. Iran has, yes, they have targeted some military targets, but there have been extensive targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure, and it's only been the strength of the defenses that have limited the damage. The damage could be quite horrific across the region as a consequence of this. Similarly, it is the responsibility of all belligerents to adhere to those rules. We see the importance of de-escalation. We emphasize, and we're talking about diplomacy for that de-escalation, we emphasize the importance of a broader group of countries than just the principal combatants, given the scale and breadth of the Iranian action. I think we need to recognize that there are a large number of countries now that are being attacked, and they are only defending. And that is admirable. It creates a possibility for a de-escalation, but certainly not a certainty, and we're encouraging that to happen.
All right, let me ask you about one of the wider possible war aims. You described Iran as the principal source of instability and terror in the Middle East. Would you welcome a change of regime in Tehran?
I mean, we always would have welcomed a change in regime in Iran. We've broken off diplomatic relations with Iran many years ago. We've listed the Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist, rightly, as a terrorist organization. So we welcome that. There's a question of the modalities of how that comes to pass and the durability of what comes next. Now, it's a very complex thing to judge how that is best going to be affected, but it is a more ex ante, it's clear, that it is a more complicated situation than merely removing people at the top of that regime. You know, I was in a conversation 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago, in Davos, a public conversation, and I was asked what the biggest risk was to world peace, and my answer at the time, yes, the Ukraine war was going on, but it was Iran for exactly this issue, both in terms of their activities and the complexity of addressing, you know, regime changes. This is not you can't just order up regime change, and we're seeing that play out.
What does President Trump's actions, what will that mean for the US role in the world in the long term? Because it does seem that his appetite for using force seems to grow with the eating. And we've seen some remarkable developments really in the last few months, the kidnapping of the Venezuelan dictator, now in conjunction with the Israelis striking at the heart of the Islamic Republic, killing indeed the supreme leader. You might think that Maduro and Khamenei were evil people, but still worry about how this affects America's position in the long run. And I wonder if we could end up in a situation where the US is feared, but not trusted or loved.
Do you want me to respond to
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of upside to responding to this question, the way it was framed.
This is
how
how
the back of the.
This is how Q&A works.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's true. This is an look. I'm going to make an adjacent point. And like adjacent, you know, it's all relative. It's way over here adjacent. But it's a serious point, which is that in the U.S. use, Chinese use in the case of rare earths, but the U.S. use of integration as leverage, the demand, the use of tariffs to forms of extraterritoriality, not just to have different tariffs, but to dictate or try to dictate policies in countries. It could be in social media, it could be in taxation, it could be cultural policy. I mean, we've seen examples of all this. It could be in terms of the current situation as we've seen in the last 24 hours with respect to certain European countries. It's a form, particularly the charging for access to the U.S. market, that form, it's monetizing their hegemony, said another way. It's monetizing their current indispensable position in a variety of economic relationships, virtually all economic relationships. You can do that for a time, but you can't do that forever. Because the reaction, and we're seeing it start to play out, is people need to diversify. And also need to avoid becoming more tied into to a country, whether it's China in some cases, or Europe, or sorry, the U.S., that will then potentially use that against you. So it's an analogy that makes it's an implicit response to your very pointed question. We have so many other topics to cover.
No, thank you for that. That's somewhat adjacent answer. Look, I think this brings us to the themes of Davos. And I want to ask you about one line in your speech that really struck me. You said, "We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy." And I just wonder about that, because I agree that nostalgia is not a strategy, but I wonder if we shouldn't mourn the old order.
That's interesting. I actually messed up on that because it originally was, and I don't know what, it's all down on me, but it was, we shouldn't mourn it too long is what it was supposed to say. And it's a serious point because, yes, there are lots of shortcomings to the old system. Many of them were fixable and with acknowledgement and rebalancing of global power that was happening with economically through G20 and others. You could see the prospect of some of them being fixed. So there's reason to mourn, reason to look back. Not just it's not just Saudade or whatever. When you nostalgia for something that didn't exist. But we don't really have time to spend a lot. My point is more when you're in a rupture. Like, don't wait around. When you're in a war, don't wait around thinking it was better when we were in peace. Like, we're in this situation. What are we going to do? How do we move forward from it? And then, ideally, how do we move forward from it in the most positive fashion, which, of course, is about where I go on to talk and what I tried to talk about today, which is to build these alliances, coalitions, partnerships.
All right, well, tell me about that. You had this great line at Davos, the middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. But how does this work in practice? You talked about diversification and dense webs of connections, but do countries such as Australia and Canada really have the military and economic heft to hold the system together?
The first is it goes around issues. Two things. I mean, the way we're looking at it is, in effect, doing an inventory of where we have strategic advantage and where we are disadvantaged, and how can we build partnerships around, what can we do to, in that strategic stack, which goes everywhere from food through to space, I guess food through to space, in our judgment. Where can we build partnerships that are going to help, or around issues? Now, the variable geometry point, I'll just make it, again, an adjacent point, but this one might be slightly more closer to what I'm about to say, which is that this also holds for global issues such as a coalition of the willing, Australia and Canada both a member of that, which provides military humanitarian aid effectively to Ukraine, but very importantly will provide the strategic backstop, security backstop for once there is any peace, when there is peace, I should say. And that's quite powerful. And that is a ad hoc grouping that's formed. And that grouping, by revealed preference, partly European by geography, but also revealed preference of those countries who most value sovereignty and territorial integrity and democracy, basically. And you have countries from Iceland who, with all respect to Iceland, is not making, they don't have a military, so their military contribution is modest, to say the least. But anyways, I'm getting slightly off topic. But the point is, there's issue-based coalitions. Coalition of the willing is an example. Then there are almost coalitions or partnerships of necessity for countries that are trying to increase their strategic autonomy. Looking at where, as I say, where we have strategic advantage, where we have shortcomings. What's an example? The easiest example is in critical minerals. We're both very strong in that. What we need to do, not just develop the minerals, but develop them with whom? Who are the buyers? Who are buyers that add to our diversification and resilience as a consequence of that? Because we don't want to be in a position where we have one buyer, and certainly don't want to be in a position where we have one buyer who is building a track record of holding people up. So that's one area. I think you look at another area, which will be part of the discussions here around space, satellite communications, the various frameworks there, where Canada, Australia, Germany, France, Luxembourg, to some degree, interestingly, have complementary expertise, are at different phases of advancement, actually can pool and create quite robust space-based communications that, again, under the control of the Minister of National Defense, are crucial for that, but then have civilian application. That's something we can do together. We can't do, or we can't effectively do, or rapidly enough do as individuals. So that's the idea. So it's not that what the speech was not, and the solution is not suggested, is middle powers of the world unite. We're going to get some new grouping, and we're all going to be together, and everything's fine. It's not that. And the dense web of connections, last point, is that you have different partnerships, different coalitions, depending on the issues. And, and that creates some redundancy in who are your friends, who's aligned, how costly it is for people to defect from coalitions under pressure from others. I mean, it's a, it's a multi-layered, it's not a game, but it's a multi-layered game if you follow game theory, but that's basically what we're doing.
One person who didn't seem to like your speech to Davos was President Trump. I'm sure that's not because you got a standing O, and he didn't.
His was bigger. His standing ovation was bigger. Let's be clear about that, and let's not.
Well, that's interesting because that goes to what I want to ask you, which is your system for dealing with President Trump. Every leader in the world has to have one, and we watched your first meeting with President Trump. I think it was 8 days after your election, and the deftness was pretty impressive. I was struck, Mr. Trump was talking about making Canada the 51st state, and he said, I'm a real estate developer, and you look at that artificial line, it doesn't make sense. And you said, Mr. President, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale, like the White House or Buckingham Palace. So you kind of managed your way through there in a way that a lot of other leaders haven't managed to do. So what's your game plan for managing Mr. Trump?
Wow, okay. Look at the 21 minutes. I'll be able to swing that, stretch this out.
It's time for another adjacent answer.
Exactly. No, the game, but look, I think the first thing is one, respect, but not obsequiousness, right? He's president for a reason. He's had success in other areas. He's eminently, elected twice. You would say elected 3 times. He does, but very successful politician, and what I find is that he appreciates, particularly in private, being direct and discussing issues and being clear where your position is. So that is crucial. You don't want to, I'm going to say something very obvious, but it's important. You don't want to say anything in public that you can't back up. You might choose your words. One chooses language for the audience, right? I mean, that's true in any circumstance. So you're careful in terms of the language that you use with him, but in a way that's consistent with what you really think. And then it's quite different in private. It's much more. He is more interested in your viewpoint on various things in private, and that creates an ability to work through things. But it's not easy, to be clear. It's not easy.
All right, let me ask you about your relationship with another important leader, Xi Jinping. You visited Beijing recently, along with many other Western countries. And when you were there, you said, I think, that Canada's partnership with China sets us up well for the New World Order. Now, I get it. That's risk management. Everybody is, when you have one partner that seems to be erratic and reliable, it makes impeccable sense to deepen your connections with the other hegemon. But what about the risks of dealing with an authoritarian country like China? How do you manage that? Because both Australia and Canada have been subject to tariffs and attempted coercion over the years.
Well, it's interesting. The first time as Prime Minister that I met with President Xi, which was at the APEC summit in November, he chose to spend the first 10 plus minutes discussing how he wanted the personal interaction to be. And if I were to summarize, no surprises. If you really care about something, be clear. Don't lecture me. I mean, he didn't say it this way, but I interpret it. Don't lecture me in public. Bring issues to me directly. Then, I mean, there is some recognition, obviously, the responsibilities of democratic leaders to be transparent in public, but don't start in public and then try to backfill. So, and so that's the first point. The second thing, I would say we take from Australia a number of lessons in terms of how to engage with China, which are consistent with what he chose, that interaction, which is to be very clear about where we're looking to cooperate and where we're not. So where, if I call it guardrails, but on the relationship. And that goes to the recalibration of our relationship with China, which had, for various reasons, valid reasons, had deteriorated, and it was time to reset that. But from a very low base, and a low base in terms of our actual level of integration with China. We're not heavily integrated with China. We're not running a big risk in terms of increasing our activity with China. And to be clear, the areas where we're cooperating, agri-food, in the broad aspects, it's very much it's in both our interest. Like there's a very strong alignment, and so the risk of being hung up on that is lessened. And then from our perspective on clean energy, broadly speaking, we need some partnerships there to help us with the scale of the build-out we're going to do. It's not going to be uniquely China. It could be India. It could be European partners. It could be U.S. partners. It could be, actually, I had some meetings today with some Australian partners. You can probably guess some of them. And so that China comes into that in that regard. We will have, and now let me do a contrast if I could, which is obviously with Australia, we will talk to and about absolutely anything from intelligence, to other cooperation, defense cooperation in the deepest sense. Anything's on the table, and much we'll do. India would be somewhere in the middle, wider than China, but obviously nowhere near as deep as Australia. So there's certain aspects in aerospace where there's opportunities with India, which we wouldn't, with China. Certain aspects around, actually there's more than certain aspects, there's a variety of aspects around AI where we would cooperate with India, in part because, to go back to the way we're approaching the world, we need to build resilience in AI. That doesn't mean we're default wholly reliant on hyperscalers as strong as they are. And certainly not, we don't look for AI cooperation with China, but we wouldn't want to go to the other side.
All right, let me ask you about India, as you've just mentioned it. You've just come from India. In the past, in the recent past, Canada's had a fraught relationship with India. You're looking to change the terms of it. Tell us a bit about Mr. Modi. He's another one of these big figures that is dominating international politics at the moment. You've just spent a couple of days with him. What was your assessment of him?
Well, look, the guy he's unique, I would say. 25 years, I was telling Glenn Stevens this, 25 years, and he has not taken a day off. 25 years straight as either chief minister in Gujarat or prime minister, not one day off. Every weekend he is out, like you, Francois Philippe, every weekend he's out campaigning. He gets 250,000 people at his rallies. You get 25, but that's okay. That's good. That's good. In rural, it's pas mal. It's pas mal du tout. But, so first off is just the level of the work that's there. Second thing, he gave me a hack that everyone follow this up, which is, again, just on a personal level, the impressions, which is he's a person who is very, and I've known this from before, but it's interesting just the interaction over time. He's very focused on delivery, I'll call it to the rural household, but, we would say in Canada, Monsieur, Madame, tout le monde, the person on the street sort of thing. So a huge motivation for the financial reform transformations, the payment systems transformation, UPI and other things, was to get money directly, as you know, directly to individuals without leakage, shall we say, in the system in real time, and to bring people, hundreds of millions of people into the formal economy. And he's very focused on that aspect of delivery. So here he's, up at this global level operating, India rising, challenges, but much positive, but a leader who keeps bringing it back down to that level. So there's much to see there. he didn't say this, but I could see him saying this, and any Indian leader saying that, talking about the hegemons using their authority, the rules-based order, all that stuff, the sort of thesis that I've been outlining, their attitude would be, well, what took you so long to figure that out? I mean, we've been non-aligned since regaining independence in 1947. And so it's in that regard, we found, colleagues were there, the discussions around the areas where we could cooperate in a collaborative way and why that was in both of our, not just economic issue, but strategic interests. Straightforward, absolutely not preaching to the converted, but just aligned in the thinking around it and creating a huge element. Last point, if I may, because you started on the nature of the relationship and the very real challenges that we've had. There is an issue with a number of countries that affect our countries said different, and there are different aspects of this: foreign interference, transnational repression, cross-border security issues. We are much more aggressive much more cognizant of these issues, much more aggressive on these issues. And the way we look at it is our approach is vigilance and engagement. And vigilance is having the right laws, having the law enforcement, monitoring for this, addressing it, calling it out, addressing issues when they come up, protecting Canadians in our case. But at the same time, having engagement with these countries so that we can have the security dialogue, so we can go directly to the individual, so we can call things out and start to address them, because vigilance alone isn't going to be enough. And so we're moving. We've made a lot of progress in the last 11 months with India, both economically, but also in the broader security relationship. More to be done, without question.
Another leader you've had a lot to do with is President Macron of France.
Yes.
You will have seen he gave a speech this week where he revised France's nuclear doctrine. And in his speech, he said, to be free, you have to be feared. To be feared, you have to be strong. Do you agree with that? Do you think that in this world that countries like Canada and Australia need to beef up their defence expenditure, make their militaries more lethal?
Well, so that aspect, the way you ended the question, yes, is the short answer. And we're doing it. And just to put some numbers on it, we will double our defense expenditure starting from start of last year to the end of this decade. So literally double in dollar terms. We will, overall, we will get to, as per the NATO definition, 5% of GDP by 2035. I'll be clear that, and this is a relevant point for cooperation, there's a 1.5% of that 5%, percentage points of the 5%, is so-called dual use. So it can be an AI, cyber, other resilience-related dual use ports, things like that. And we need to do that. Look, we have a NATO commitment. We've made that commitment. We'll move towards it. We're not going to spend money on defense just to spend money on defense. The issue, the challenge is for us, or the reality is a better way to put it, is that we had a long period where our geography and candidly, and this is a challenge that President Trump has put, and he's right about it, where we had both because of geography and reliance on the U.S. Had underinvested in defense. And so now we're catching up to that and supplanting that and making decisions around that. Do I think we need to be feared? I mean, look, there's great. I mean, it was great Gallic flourish and imagery was fantastic. We need to have a deterrent. I mean, it depends on your definition. I mean, you need deterrence without question, and it needs to be costly to impinge on our sovereignty potentially costly to impinge on our sovereignty in the Arctic, in cyberspace, in space. Yeah.
All right, a couple more questions. Let me ask you about the United Nations, because the UN has always been such a big part of Canada's external relations. But when it comes to contemporary conflicts, whether it's Ukraine or the Middle East, it seems like the United Nations is nowhere to be seen. And I think back 20 years to the time of the Iraq War, and Kofi Annan was really quite close to the centre of global action. I don't know if these days too often world leaders have to say, you know, what does Antonio Guterres think about this issue? What's wrong with the United Nations, and how can it be fixed?
It's a deep question, and just to give you a sense of how closely we hold the United Nations in our, not affection, but in our thinking. Literally my chief of staff was our permanent representative. I guess you weren't that permanent representative at the United Nations. So we did a great job. So we think about these issues a lot. That's the first thing I want to say, and I'm going to say a few things. One is that. Secondly, everything we're doing or looking to do on variable geometry, these coalitions around issues, we do not view these as substitutes for the United Nations. We view these as necessary responses to immediate issues. We think that the extent to which these succeed, they can, you know, the modalities and the solutions can be, you know, would be pulled up to a it depends on the issue, but United Nations or you know, the Bretton Woods institutions if it's something financial, or at a COP level either. So it's important to really emphasize that, and I'll give you a precise example and come back to UN. The bridge we're trying to build with Australia between CPTPP and the EU, I mentioned it, you know, that's effectively going to be under WTO. It's going to be a modernization of WTO rules, which proves the model, or at least we think will prove the model. And as if and when WTO is, and I saw Ngosi's picture on the way in, so full respect to her, but as all powers engage with the WTO is the right way to do it, then that can be, those solutions can be pulled up. What's wrong with the UN? Part of, I mean, some of the issues are very obvious, which is the representation of the Security Council, which doesn't reflect today's reality. That extends to the Bretton Woods institutions, so it's obviously incredibly difficult to change, but it's necessary to change. It is necessary to change, and you know, I know Australia is looking for, in its rotation, 29-30, I think would be the year where you could be on the Security Council, and I think that would be an important component of your thinking. Obviously, leave to the government in terms of the priority. We'd very much welcome your presence there. I mean, it's almost another session to go through all the elements.
We've got another hour.
We've got another hour, but it's also, you know, once you start breaking rules, it's learned behavior, and the fact that we're having these conflicts without even the thought of recourse to the United Nations is deeply troubling.
All right, you're here to build, as part of your diversification strategy. Canada and Australia have so much in common. You said at Davos that Canada has what the world wants, and Australia has a lot of those things too: energy, capital, talent. Exactly. We're both federal democracies, vast, beautiful territories, but we're a long way away from each other. So where does your ambition lie in the Australia-Canada relationship? What's the big thing you'd like to thicken?
Well, I think it's first and foremost is the shared recognition. Look, I mean, obviously not completely aligned on the moment and the importance of partnership, but a recognition that taking our partnership and with other like-minded countries is going to be fundamental to navigating whatever comes next. It is absolutely, to put it in, influenced by my former central bank, it's absolutely a no regret strategy. You know, when you're managing risk, like one of the things you want to do is think about, well, what will I wish I had done? And what's the downside of doing that? What is the downside? Let's say the United States and the world order returns to status quo ante miraculously in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. Well, is it going to be a bad thing that Canada and Australia have deepened our defense partnership, working together on AI, working together on critical mineral. No, clearly those are positive. If the world remains as it is, or the trajectory continues, it's going to be really valuable if we've done that. So I think the first is recognizing strategically the value of this. That's one. In terms of the specific examples, I don't want to fully scoop, and we still have to meet with the cabinet and finalize things, but I think what you'll see in the next 24 hours will be, I'm hopeful that we'll see a series of agreements that point the direction of what we see collectively as the priorities for building that partnership.
All right, last question. We've got both central bankers and prime ministers in the audience. You're the only one who's done both jobs. What's similar between them? What's different? Who has more power and who has more fun?
Wow. Okay. What's similar? Taking big, these jobs, you take big decisions. And the decisions. The difference is the decisions in general, absent financial crises for central bankers are more structured. You kind of know when you're going to make the decision. You basically know the information you're going to look. It's decision making under certainty, but there is a structure to it. As a prime minister, it's many more decisions, much more diversity, much less perfect information. I'm looking at Malcolm, right? And there's less structure. There is another big difference, which by definition in the job, there is an ability to lead, that is part of the job, is to lead and set the agenda in a way you know, I was an ice hockey goalie, as you may know. So you're in an ice hockey goal, you're reacting to what's going on. You're more the center forward. I'm not going to. You're more the center forward, the center to keep my hockey analogy. I should be doing Aussie rules football and yeah, exactly. Your cricket. How's it going, by the way, in the T20?
Good, good. Yeah, good. Looking forward to playing you.
Okay, we've been sandbagging the whole way. We're going to really surprise you. But you know that's the job and the ability to lead and help to set the agenda and catalyze this. And who has more fun? Well, boy, the dinners at Basel were. I mean, they were crazy, right? Very good wine. Yeah.
Go on, tell the story. Tell it.
Well, okay, this is a long time ago. In fact, it was 2 weeks into the job at Governor of the Bank of Canada. It's February 2008. And I go there, and Bear Stearns is collapsing. It seemed like a big deal at the time. In retrospect, it was like, there's nothing, but it was a big deal. And we had to decide, because Asia, typical Asia was going to open. And so we go to this dinner, and it's called the G10 Central Banks. So it's the core group of central banks, and Jean-Claude Trichet is the chair. We show up, and we have an hour and a half to make a decision about flooding the system with liquidity or shutting certain things down, et cetera. It's pretty complex, but we're around this dinner table. It's like a 7-course meal. And Trichet spends the first 10 minutes. He welcomes me, which I thought was nice. Mark, welcome. And then he says, we have the best wine in Europe at this dinner. And since it's the best wine in Europe, it's the best wine in the world. And then he goes through the wines. He describes all the wines, tick, tick, tick. And he's like, well, have this one, but, the Pinot Grigio. And I'm like, fuck. And then he finishes it, and he says, okay, listen, we have an hour. And he says, okay, we have to decide, because the politicians are useless, basically, as he says. And if we don't decide here, all is lost. Ben, what should we do? Anyways, an hour later, all I remember is I'm like, yeah, the wine is fantastic. How much are we on the hook for? But anyways, we got it done. So yeah, the central bankers have a lot more fun, and we're working all the time. No fun, no rest.
Right.
No rest for us.
Well, PM, I've had a lot of fun tonight. You mentioned no wine, but a lot of fun. You mentioned that you were a goalie, a hockey goalie. I certainly don't feel I've got the puck past you. You defended your goal very well. You moved the goal to adjacent
I moved the goalposts, yes, literally.
So thank you for that. But I'm going to call on the Deputy Chairman of the Lowy Institute, Stephen Lowy, to make a formal vote of thanks. Stephen.
Thank you. Very well done.
Thank you, Michael. I didn't realise there'd be such humour in the room before I was about to get up here. But on behalf of, first of all, I'd like to thank all the audience in the room, and there's a very big audience on TV and also on the webcast. Prime Minister, on behalf of my father, the chairman of the Lowy Institute, as well as the board, many who are in this room this evening, I really want to thank you for your address and your comments with Michael. As you said in your opening remarks, we have had many world leaders come through the doors of the Institute over the more than past 20 years. But it's really a privilege and a red-letter day to have a leader with your stature join us tonight, together with your wife, Madam Prime Minister, and your colleagues. You mentioned that it's an honour for you to be here, but really the honour is ours. This is your only speech, I understand, outside of the formal speech, I think, in Parliament tomorrow. And it's a huge privilege for us to have you with us. You have a clear analysis, a clear understanding, and you share that with us. But you also do that with such seriousness and also with a mix of such humour. And it's so appreciated to see how relaxed you are to discuss such serious topics from the Middle East, the obvious issues we're all facing right now, to the US, to China, to India, to the UN, to the grappling with the issues of middle powers, AI, and all the challenges that we face. But of course, Australia and Canada enjoys a deep friendship and a common value system. And it's an incredible privilege to have you with us. At the Institute, we really exist for three purposes. That is to contribute to the debate on foreign policy. We exist to project our voices to the world. And I'm very proud to say that we have millions and millions of visits to our research and our website and our podcasts, and over 70% of that comes from overseas. And that to us is a mark of the impact of Australia on foreign policy thinking around the world, particularly in our region. And of course, we exist to inform. And I think tonight, anybody that's been exposed to your speech and your presentation with Michael would feel much richer for it and have a much better understanding of dealing with the immense complexity, particularly geopolitical complexity that we're dealing with today. You have the knack of defining it and explaining it in such a simple way that we can understand it. And these are very complex issues. And clearly you have a deep understanding, a deep intellect, and you seem to be, in an Australian sense, a great bloke. And we appreciate that very much, and we appreciate you and your colleagues. You've also come here for business, and you've brought with you the Canadian pension industry. At our previous business at Westfield, we had a very deep relationship with CPPIB. In fact, we had an $8 billion portfolio of shopping centres together in the US and the UK, and we understand the impact of how two great countries with great pension plans, the impact that they can make on productivity and on business. And it's great that you are part of your reason for the visit is that our two the pension industries in our two great countries can work together. So I think that's a marvellous outcome, and good luck with that, and good luck with the rest of your visit in Canberra. And again, we appreciate this very much. I will ask everybody to please stay in your seats until the Prime Minister and the official party. I've been asked to say this. If you want to mingle, it's up to you, because I can see that you often go off script. Yeah. But I will leave it to you. Okay. And again, just with huge appreciation, we wish you a great rest of your trip, and thank you for being with us. Thank you very much, everybody.
you.